Hello and welcome to Collapse Club, where the topic is how shall we live in the time of collapse? I am David Baum in Seattle. With me today is Katie Carr from Bali. Hello, Katie.
Hi, David. Thank you for the invitation.
I know Katie. I know you, Katie, as a founding member of the core team of the Deep Adaptation Forum and as the creator of the deep relating methodology the group uses. But
Mhm.
I think you are more than that. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, I might not be more than that, to be honest, David. Yeah, so as you said, I was a founding member, one of the first members of the core team of the Deep Adaptation Forum, and yeah, I'd been working with Jem for a while then when he invited me to join the team. All of my working life has been in education, in state compulsory education in universities, in colleges, youth work, community learning. And most recently, before I joined the Deep Adaptation Forum, I was working for a small non-profit in the north of England, and we supported teachers and school leaders to engage in what's called sustainability education and global citizenship education. And I think that was probably where probably where I learned most about the processes and the conditions required for unlearning, for creating a space or a group field which feels safe enough for people to begin to disidentify with some of their beliefs about how they are and how the world is. And
Interesting. Let me, if I may, I want to hear more about that specifically, but I'd like to offer my testimony about the effectiveness of the deep relating method. I was intimately involved with the Deep Adaptation Forum for 2 years, and the thing that I discovered was that the method used there helped me forge connections with people all over the world that endure to this day for years. When we started, I was skeptical. I didn't understand what deep relating was supposed to be. When we started meetings with meditations, I was like, what is this? Why are we wasting time? Let's get to it. But over the time, I changed. And I now, if a group starts a meeting without some sort of centering and connecting ceremony or process, I'm like, this can't succeed. We have to make the connection first. So you helped me, and I'd like you to tell me how you did that. What is deep relating about, and why did it help me so much?
yeah, yeah, I'm smiling listening to you describe your experience. Um, I've got curiosity as well. If I can ask you a question, you're talking
Oh,
about you express some almost some sense of mystery. What was this? What has happened? But you noticed. I hear that you noticed a qualitative difference in your experience, and I wonder if you could go a little bit deeper and if it's possible to describe what was qualitatively differently for you.
somehow people became more present. All of my interactions have been over Zoom because of distance. A lot of my colleagues are in Europe, and the pandemic can't even meet with people who are local. So you would think that that would, well, it does create a distance. It keeps one away. So to somehow reach through the screen and be dealing with people as humans rather than as avatars of some position. Maybe that's
Mm.
it. Instead of people coming as representatives of a position, they were people with feelings. And even if they did have a position, and even if we got into a substantive discussion, somehow it was more warm. There was blood in it instead of just, the oil of intellectual discussion.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, so you're describing one of the reasons why I invite a check-in, even if it's a brief one, at the beginning of every gathering, in person and virtual, is recognizing that most likely each of us has a lot of lived experience of showing up at gatherings where we have internalized unconscious expectations about how we should show up in that space. If it's a board meeting, or even if it's a family gathering, you have these unconscious filters about what version of me are these people going to welcome. And one of the principles that I think probably has impacted in the way that you've described of holding space and group facilitation within deep adaptation is that all of you is welcome. And I know I've one or two times when I've heard people reflect on, oh yeah, this check-in, we've been doing this for years, it's hippie nonsense. And actually for me, it's a really important and quite radical act of political subversion and social change to say that we acknowledge that we are each human, and we show up with our messiness, and we show up with the unconscious patterns of behavior which are cultural, which have been internalized about showing up messy is not a good thing. Showing up with your emotions is not helpful when sensible decisions have to be made. Or, this is a crisis. There is urgency required here. All of those patterns which, frankly, are not just unhelpful, but can be harmful.
The topic of deep adaptation is collapse, which is shorthand for all manner of disaster and trouble having to do with the climate and social breakdown, very bad news. Mm-hmm. Why is it important to have this emotional authenticity when you're discussing that particular topic or set of topics?
Mm-hmm. So one of the answers to that is about well-being. I know how I feel when I'm consciously, or increasingly I know unconsciously, repressing a part of myself, particularly if that part is a very strong emotion. If it's resentment or anger, if it's deep grief, how wearing it is to kind of carry on regardless, show up and carry on. And specifically about grief, there's lots and lots of research about the impact of suppressing it, and also the ways in which it's suppressed in modern Western culture. So, but this isn't just about the individual. This isn't just about, the wellness industry and we all need to be our best selves, because that kind of suppression also impacts upon our relationships. So something which is inside and is not being acknowledged will be projected outside. It needs a place to go. And maybe when we look outside at the structures, the institutions, even something as ubiquitous as capitalism, which a lot of people say is the root cause of our problem, we can understand those things as projections, collective, aggregate projections of unexpressed things like fear, need for safety, or a sense of insecurity. What do we need to put in place that's going to give the illusion that these parts of ourselves, which are desperate to be seen and heard, feel like they've got what they need?
So it's a way of opening the avenues to the deeper feelings that must come into play when discussing issues of this kind of importance.
Yeah, yeah. And I think I can, yeah, there's part of me reluctant. I notice a part of me reluctant speaking in this way, which is making generalizations. So I'm going to come back to, yeah, return to something really personal. Is this is very, very difficult to live with all of the time. And not just, yeah, I want to make it clear, this isn't, I don't subscribe to this idea that collapse is a thing. It's an event that's going to happen in the future. And it's important to me because I've lived this privileged life thus far. There are very, very painful, a journey of very painful experiences in the history of humanity in general. And for me, that's opening my awareness to all of that. And being able to express, so I'm coming back now to a somatic experiencing, being able to understand what's arising moment by moment, create space for it, express it through movement or through dialogue, finding a person who is a safe listener for you. It's kind of taking the pressure off when it needs to be taken off, as often as it needs to be taken off, instead of waiting it to build up, to become illness in the body even.
And when we are able to find this in ourselves and make connections with others, and the grief and other feelings get the attention that they need, what then is the good result of that? Mm-hmm. Is it purely personal? Is this a quest for equanimity in the face of world disaster? Are we trying to build something? Why do we do these practices?
Okay, so I can think of at least 3 reasons right now. And I'm searching my mind for who said a quote, and I can't find it. There is a quote. Someone famous once said that if we could understand, if I could fully know your entire inner being, your history, your feelings, then I could only have compassion for you, regardless of what your actions were. So part of this is getting to understand the complex and usually hidden layers of what influences how I show up in the world, and how I'm sometimes clumsy, I'm not perfect, I upset people inadvertently. Knowing and fully welcoming that means it's a lot easier to find a place of very deep compassion for other humans. It's a pathway straight down to forgiveness. And we need that. We need that if we are going to make some individual and collectively wise decisions about how we might reduce harm in coming years. And another really important part of allowing space for the maybe infinite and never-ending flow of emotional and somatic responses is so that it is possible to it may be possible to achieve what you called equanimity, knowing what's happening to me is just emotion and it's going to pass, and it doesn't have to be the part of me which makes executive decisions, which can also, so a lot of people, there has been a lot of criticism about the deep adaptation outlook, which says it's defeatist, that it's sitting back and doing nothing. And I work with people one-to-one mainly now, and especially around this finding ways of continuing to do incredible, impactful, meaningful work towards social change, even knowing that the outcomes that you're hoping to bring about probably won't be achieved, even knowing that there's a bleak outlook. It's possible to find this place of taking really meaningful, radical action. There was a third one, but I'm tired of the sound of my own voice. I'm going to.
Oh, okay. Thank you. Well, you've raised a very important point. You mentioned about the expectation of results or the expectation of success. In the absence of that, is it still important to do anything? And of course, this goes to there has been criticism of deep adaptation, but not just deep adaptation. Anyone on the collapse aware side, or certainly collapse acceptance, gets the criticism of, well, if you say there's no hope, then you're telling people to give up, and that leads to, failure and doom. And yet it is absolutely clear that people have a huge hunger to be with other people who are aware and who accept, and yet feel an incredibly strong impulse to act, to connect, to talk to other people, to make changes in their own lives, to bring goodness into the world. What do you think is the source of that impulse to continue without regard to the ultimate result?
I'm not sure I can answer your question, because I'm not sure if there's one answer. I think the one thing that I'll reflect on is the fact that I think that there's a false dichotomy going on between the sometimes phrased as the being and the doing. We have loads and loads of practice in getting busy. In fact, I feel like it's a disease of the modern world, this blind assumption that productivity, getting busy, achieving is the thing to do. So that's one of the reasons why, through my work, it's not vilifying doing, it's saying there are some things you can get in order first. So activist burnout is a really well-known thing. So helping people develop the tools to take care of themselves and each other, which I think in XR, I think they call it the regenerative culture. So it's, what's the impulse to do? For me, the impulse to do comes from the opposite end of this emotional spectrum. I know that as I am getting better at sitting and being with really difficult, previously overwhelming emotions of paralysis, of hopelessness, of fear, sadness, my capacity for experiencing all of the enlivening emotions builds as well. I feel the joy in connection, and that's a big motivator for me.
It occurs to me we have not described what happens in the practice of deep relating.
Yeah.
Let me kill two birds with one stone, as it were. I believe you're traveling to the United Kingdom next week to hold an in-person workshop in the context of deep adaptation there.
Yeah.
Could you describe your feelings about going there and then what you're going to do?
Yeah. Whew. The course that I'll be co-leading is a leadership course, leadership in the face of societal collapse. And yes, deep relating is a big part of that. It's a university course, so, and it's master's level, so it contains social theory. And in that context, deep relating is a kind of theory in practice. But this isn't the direction. I want to try and describe deep relating in terms that might help people who are new to it, who are watching this, get a sense of what we're talking about. So deep relating, which is one of many different modalities which is used in deep adaptation, but it is a central one. It's a relational meditation practice. So it's an awareness practice. So anyone who's meditated will know that one of the intentions of meditating is to become more and more aware of the richness and complexity of emotion in the present moment and noticing it. So the intention is to bring that kind of awareness into relationship. So it looks dialogue based. It looks like two people sharing their experience, but it's actually it's an embodiment practice. I would say it's an embodiment practice, as much as it is about dialogue. So it's bringing awareness, welcoming in the somatic experiencing, noticing as we're here together, I'm noticing the ways in which being here with you is impacting upon me, and noticing the ways in which I am responding or reacting to this exchange, noticing maybe some kind of deeply embedded stories about how the world is and how I should be in the world are moving through me and influencing the choices that I'm making moment to moment. So one of the reasons why it's important is that in order to find ways of reducing harm, in order to take action from places which are loving responses, we need to understand what are the mechanisms, particularly cultural mechanisms, which are implicit in and complicit in modern humanity's trajectory of destruction and harm. And many of those can be traced to a sense of separateness, sense of competition, what people sometimes call the ego self. This shows up in lots of different ways. The need to be seen, the need to be valued, the need to feel safe, the need to have security in terms of being safe in the context of perceived scarcity. So in deep relating, we slow right down in order to bring awareness to the ways in which these usually hidden cultural assumptions are replicated in the way that we relate with other people.
And by becoming aware, and by becoming aware of the embedded stories, we can bring them to consciousness, choose how to deal with them, and then be free of them, or have them as, tools for our use rather than something that controls us. That's been my experience of it. Let's talk about the journey of deep adaptation, or the pathway. Well, you had mentioned the pathway to forgiveness. My experience facing collapse and doing it, fortunately, in the company of other deeply contemplative people, has been one of an expanding horizon, that my perspective has grown and grown. And instead of, as you say, seeking safety or security, coming to realize and accept that those are not available now. And in fact, the wisdom is that they're never available, that humans live in a constantly flowing river of experience and time. But to learn to accept that safety and security, the absence of that, I find the flip side of that is to discover that we as humans, we have flexible power to respond to anything that happens. Mm-hmm. So we can give up the fixed, solid self and fixed solid modes that we use, and instead adopt a flexible way, and have confidence that that is going to suffice and that we'll be okay. What has your journey been like through deep adaptation, or adaptation to the changing world and the situation that we find ourselves in?
What has my journey been like? No, I notice a really, really deep resistance to talking about myself.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
Well, we can do something else. Would you like a different question?
No, it's if I can have a moment, David, and I'm trying to connect with the pieces, that I can respond to, which were most alive for me in what you said. One of them that really impacted on me that I want to comment on was, you said earlier something about the capacity to choose one's state of being, really, or choose what to do or what to say or how to be in any given moment, being one of the impacts for you of cultivating this different way of being, this deeper self-awareness in relationship. And you also talked about the flexible power. And I want to comment on that a little bit in relation to hope and the kind of the mainstream assumption. You can't take away people's hope. People need hope. And firstly, I think that is so easily accepted that I have some warning lights about it, about that kind of common sense. But from a psychological perspective, hope is really connected with agency, and we know that people who are experiencing depression often feel like they have neither. And so I want to make a connection with what you talked about, this flexible power, in that doing the work, in inverted commas, as it's called, understanding oneself and the reasons why one shows up in the way one does, and the understanding gives that sense of agency, but it's agency in the realm of being rather than doing. we might not be able to create the practical future that we might want to imagine, but we can exercise our agency. We can choose compassion. We can choose to take risks. I've been over the last few weeks, I've been working with a group of international scholars who each part of their own journey into collapse awareness is taking the choice, taking the decision to speak out more, communicate more in mainstream. So not speaking with the converted, which I think is a lot of what we do, but understanding, what are the inner barriers that are stopping that? I don't want to be on the receiving end of criticism, of being pilloried, a sense of really deep fear of being exiled. So yeah, and I guess what I'm saying is, it's the answer to your question is, it's been a big part of the journey for me, is kind of re-galvanizing, understanding that there are choices accessible to me about how to be in the world, which if I listen to the invisible narratives about don't take up too much space, don't put yourself at risk, humans are a threat. That's part of what the modern individualistic capitalist narrative tells us. We need to be suspicious. So yeah, huge amount of hope and agency in terms of the choices that I can make.
I want to shift gears as we approach the end here. There's a question that I simply don't want to miss the opportunity to ask. It has to do with grief and the difference between men and women. When facing the loss that we anticipate with collapse and the losses that we've already experienced in the world today in our lives, grief is a response to loss, and coming to terms with it. I have found that men and women deal with grief very differently. Men tend to think about what they can do about it, and women, well, I won't characterize what women do because I don't think I understand it. My thesis, my idea is that men need women to process their grief, that there is something about being a woman that allows the absorption and processing of grief in a healthy way, maybe some connection with the earth. And I hesitate to traffic in stereotypes, but still, I think men need women to process grief. And I wonder what you think of that.
So it is there's this sense of trepidation. There's a belief in me that this is sensitive landscape to begin to step out into. And I'm fascinated by your question. I guess I have some caveats to begin with, which one of them is acknowledging that it's I want to receive what you said as a generalization, which is valid in terms of how helpful or not it can be, rather than a description of how the world is, and also acknowledging that that it can be unhelpful and even harmful. There are many people who identify as neither one nor the other, and not as their biological sex.
Yes, so thank you for that. I should acknowledge that. Thank you.
Yeah, no, that's fine. So how do I engage with this? Maybe I'll answer it in terms of the socialized role of male and female, understanding that is present for all humans, and we each internalize it to a greater or lesser extent and make our own sense out of it. It's a complicated caveat. I a few years ago, on a meditation retreat, one of the teachers gave a practice from his lineage, which was to do with a heart opening practice. And he said that the teaching is given, women should do 40 repetitions, men should do 250 repetitions, because it's a given that being socialized as a man makes it a lot less easy for you to connect with the emotions. And I think that's the key point of it. That's a big part of what's important for me when I would describe myself as a feminist, in that the unwritten rules about how men and women should be harms everybody. And yes, I think specifically about grief, yeah, maybe it's part of the general landscape of, I'm guessing at some point in your early life, you learned as a little boy, there was a transition from it being okay to cry and laugh and express, to then subtly learning that, yeah, those things aren't what big boys do. And women don't learn that in the same way. We have, most of us, my experience is of sisterhood, and there being spaces where it's okay for me to talk about the ins and outs, my subjective experiencing of the world. Men need women. Maybe we all need to know that it's okay to deeply feel anything.
Thank you for that. I think that's a good start on answering my question. I think women do have more latitude to feel and express their feelings. Well, Katie, I want to thank you for spending this time with me. As I said, I learned over the couple of years that I was involved with Deep Adaptation that to respect the power of your method. And it has stayed with me since that time, as I sort of venture out into the larger collapse aware community. I think Deep Adaptation and the practices that you instilled there have a role to play in the wider community. So thank you for coming here to have this all too brief conversation. Are you looking forward to travel?
I want to say something before I answer the question.
Oh, yeah.
It's been a pleasure, David, and I also really, really feel strongly you're speaking to me right now, but the practices which have evolved and flourished, and which you described as the impact that they have had on you, were not only to do with me by a long way. So I've been working with a large group of volunteer facilitators, each of whom have contributed generously to what this evolving language and practice is. And also my colleague Zori Tomova, who was a member of the core team. I have huge gratitude for what she brought to this work as well. Am I looking forward to travel? I haven't traveled more than 50 miles in the last 2 years, so there is some trepidation around that.
Well, I wish you well. I wish you safe travels. And thank you for being here today with me.
Mm.
This is Collapse Club. I am David Baum in Seattle, and until we meet again, farewell.
Be well.